Hello, hello, hello. Thank you all so much for being here. This is incredible. This is an amazing audience, an amazing event. I'm going to read a little from both books. I'm going to start with just reading a few paragraphs from the introduction of both and. I wrote these paragraphs, I wrote this introduction just a few days after the presidential election because deadlines don't change even when you're feeling traumatized. And then I'll read a little bit from the novel. Last year, Donald Trump won the 2024 presidential election, during which Republicans spent hundreds of millions of dollars on anti-trans ads. As I watched the results, my heart fell from my chest. I knew what was coming, and predictably, less than 12 hours later, I tuned into morning shows where I saw political pundits from both parties blaming the trans community for the election results. Early analysis saw folks saying that the Democratic Party was out of touch with the majority of American voters, that the party was too woke, that American families didn't want grown men playing sports against little girls. The absurdity of that statement aside, I kept thinking to myself, but I'm an American voter too. What followed was a profound sense of displacement, politically speaking. While my values are progressive, I have always been a voter motivated by pragmatism and harm reduction. I was raised in a Black middle-class family of churchgoers by parents born between the silent generation and the baby boomers. I was raised to vote in every election, and I was raised to vote without attaching a grave sense of preciousness to that vote. It wasn't necessary to agree with everything my chosen political candidate said, in part because voting wasn't supposed to be the sum of my political engagement. It was a chess move, a means to an end, and it was the bare minimum. More simply put, I have always been a registered voter and have always voted for the Democratic ticket. Given my values, this means I have also always held a deep sense of frustration at the party's continued pursuit of moderate white voters. Being Black and being queer, I have always worried that when it comes to policy, measures that affirmed and protected my existence would end up on the chopping block, and very often that's exactly what happened. But in recent years, public opinion has shifted. Marriage equality, for instance, has been legal for nearly a decade, and folks have largely realized that their heterosexual marriages were never in danger. Perhaps it was the optimism of youth or the stability of democracy, but I never looked into the future fearing what it held for me or my community. Yet when faced with the possibility of a rebooted Trump administration, I felt strongly that Kamala Harris needed to win if I was to maintain any sense of safety. I'll stop there, but there's more in this incredible anthology, and there are 17 incredible authors, some of whom are well-established, some of whom are sort of going to be new to readers. The essays are amazing. It was my honor and pleasure to get to curate this series and put it out into the world. So now I'm going to read from my novel, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about the journey I've had this year with this book. It took me 14 years to get to this point with this novel, and it's an outgrowth of the grief that I experienced when my father died very suddenly when I was in the first semester of my MFA program. We had a complicated relationship, and I was trying to figure out how to write truthfully and honestly because I wasn't working very hard on my fiction. I wasn't revising it, and I knew that unless I figured out how to write something honest, I would never produce anything that was worth a reader's time and attention. And this novel grew out of that. This year, just a couple of days before I published it, we got word that my mom was going to probably pass away. And the day that it launched, my family put her in hospice care. And that opened up a whole new level of grief that I had to contend with the book. Every sort of milestone that it achieved was accompanied by something really complicated and difficult. And when I finished the first leg of my book tour in June, I got back to my apartment and I took the boxes of author copies that they send you. They'll send you, 20 or 30 copies of your book. And you're like, what am I going to do with 20 or 30 copies of my book? But they send you them. And I put them in a closet and closed the door because I couldn't bear to look at them because of the pain that I felt that it represented. And so through rest and time and therapy, which is a blessing, I have gotten into a different headspace, and it's incredible to get a second leg of this book tour and get to celebrate this book with incredible audiences like all of you. Because in the spring, I was sort of like faking it a little bit. I was just doing my best, and now I'm like genuinely joyful to celebrate this book and share it with you. I have not talked like this at any event, but I feel so safe here that I feel like I can. So thank you. I'm going to read from chapter 3 of When the Harvest Comes. All you need to know is that it centers an interracial queer couple named Davis and Everett. Davis is 24, 25, very effeminate. He's a professional violist. He's marrying Everett, who is in his mid to late 30s. He's white. He comes from a family reminiscent of the Kennedys. They are, in many ways, polar opposites. And the novel opens on their wedding day. Between the comforter and Everett's body wrapped around his, Davis is plenty warm. He pushes himself up, watching Everett's arm fall from around him. He shifts from his side, rises, and tiptoes to the window. He looks out at the water. The house is well insulated, but if he tilts his chin and turns his head just so, he can hear the ocean, waves washing up, washing down, the tide lingering at its crest before rolling lazily back. The world, still dark, still quiet, belongs to him, and all the feelings he carries into their wedding day. Davis moves through the master suite, opening the door to the hallway where, despite his best effort, he wakes Bam Bam, Everett's golden retriever, who follows him to the kitchen. He opens the freezer, pulls out a stainless steel tumbler, and fills it with ice, then water. Standing by the counter, he starts chugging. He is overwhelmed by his joy, his body shaky, his breath shallow and quick. But there's something about drinking an excruciatingly cold glass of water that fortifies Davis. It seems to bring him back to earth. He can't believe this day is here. He grips the edge of the counter, tries to flatten the soles of his feet against the tile floor, anything to keep his body in the moment, which he suspects will help tether his mind. Davis is wildly, indescribably, incandescently in love. Certainly Everett is the kind of man Davis dreamed of, charming, successful, and passionate amid any number of additional easy-to-spot qualities. But those traits, Davis thinks, are not the reason for the love. Davis loves Everett because he knows Everett. Everett is a knowable man, perhaps the first he's encountered. Everett is the exact opposite of the Reverend, and the most vital thing Davis knows about Everett is his innate goodness. It felt like a dream come true when Everett's parents offered the Montauk house as a wedding venue. Davis knows the Caldwells are fond of him, but despite Everett's insistence that they love him, Davis has never quite believed it. Getting married in their beachside Hamptons house, a home filled with decades of memories, is a welcome that Davis never expected and can never repay. All he can think, as he looks around the kitchen, as he peers through the sliding glass doors toward the beach, as he refills the tumbler with water, is that now he is part of this family. He gets to make memories here, too. "Come on, boy," Davis says, gesturing for Bam Bam to follow him back upstairs. He's so excited he can't sleep, but what he can do is run scales and arpeggios while he has some time before Everett wakes up. He runs them every day, and even though he'd promised Everett he wouldn't practice the viola this week, he's done them every morning. When they arrived, he commandeered one of the smaller guest bedrooms so he could slip away unnoticed for short bouts of practice. When he opens the door, he pauses as Bam Bam looks between him and the master suite. Davis smiles, bends down, pets Bam Bam, and gestures for the dog to follow him inside. But Bam Bam trots back to his post at the door to the master suite, plops down, and wags his tail before closing his eyes. "Smart. You've got a big day ahead of you," he says to Bam Bam, winking, before he quietly shuts the door. He opens the case, pulls out the viola, and places his ebony practice mute on the bridge. After he tunes, he begins with open strings, taking the opportunity to feel the knuckles on his right hand, his bowing hand, contract and extend. There's tension in his shoulders, so he breathes deep, letting them sit where they fall naturally. He pulls the bow along the C string, fully extending his arm until the bow comes to a stop at the tip. He brings the bow back to the frog, and then he repeats the same 2 long strokes on the other strings. Although the volume is muted, there's still richness, fullness in the tone. Next is a round of 3-octave major and minor scales to get his left hand warmed up. Davis was trained in the Galamian method. The beginning of each scale has an extra turn for intonation and finger precision. With each scale, he uses a different bow stroke, tries a new rhythm, from legato to staccato, from quarter notes to triplets. For Davis, scales and arpeggios are like daily meditation. He can quiet his mind, turn his attention to observing, which is different from thinking. The stillness of his body, contrasted with the quick dexterity of his fingers, has a way of calming him, bringing steadiness. Davis had tried explaining this on their second date. Everett, who'd worn a deep blue button-down tucked neatly into gray, flat front slacks, had laughed at the thought of playing scales every day. Don't you get bored of them? A question that normally might have hurt or offended Davis instead amused him. He doesn't know the way his eyes glinted, having caught an errant ray from the restaurant's lighting. He doesn't know how his sudden smile, joyful yet slightly condescending, managed to capture the most tender sort of happiness that Everett had ever seen. What Davis does know, what he remembers, is how quickly he shook his head, how he leaned forward and really looked Everett in the eye. His boldness in that moment still delights him. He almost knocked his fork to the ground as he tried to explain the joy of scales, the beauty in setting aside time every day to go back to the beginning, to lose yourself in rote practice. Think of it like this. On a playground, you've got your slide, your tire swing, your seesaw, your jungle gym. They're bolted to the ground. They never move. One day, I slide down the slide. Then I run over to the tire swing, sit on top of it, and swing around in big, lopsided circles. Then I climb into the jungle gym where I crawl through the yellow plastic tube, but not the red plastic tube with the right angle, because I want to climb down the mini ropes course, and the red tube doesn't lead to that. Then I'll run over to the seesaw and ride that with my friend. The next day I'll start with the tire swing, but I'll turn it sideways so I can slide my legs through the hole in the middle and spin round and round like a top, rather than sitting on top of it swinging in those big lopsided circles. And then I'll go to the seesaw, but this time I'll sit on the other side so I can face the street instead of the school parking lot. I'll chase my friend up the giant slide because I'm not feeling gravity that day. And when I end at the jungle gym, I'll climb up the ropes course and walk the plank backward until I end up in the pirates' quarters. That's where I can steer the ship and look out over the rest of the playground. Do you see what I'm getting at? Before Everett could respond, Davis kept going. Every day, I have to play on that playground because it's the only playground my school has. That's the equipment, that's what I've got. But am I running around solo, or is it a giant game of TV tag? Am I running up the slide or sliding down it? Everything about how I use the playground is completely up to me. Nobody gets to tell me what to do. In the constraints, in the limitations of the playground, I find my freedom. Scales and arpeggios are the same way. I know the notes and they never change, so I have to get creative. Do I slur my F minor 3-octave scale in triplets going up and staccato and square eighth notes going down? Am I solo pianissimo in my A minor arpeggio today? Or am I mezzo forte? Do I spiccato the bow in G major because it's a joyful key and then go legato and molto adagio in F minor because it's dramatic and I'm playing Brahms in a recital that night? Davis sat back then, noticing that Everett's eyes had never strayed from his. It's very different from when I'm learning a piece, Everett. Scales and arpeggios, that's the playground. That's where I get to run and play and jump and be free. Wow, Everett said. You really took that metaphor and ran with it. Davis smiled and shrugged, suddenly bashful. Did I? Everett narrowed his eyes, but he smiled too as he did it. You've said all that before. Davis laughed. Swear to God, I came up with it on the spot. Davis watched Everett, watching him as he crossed his legs, sat back and brought his martini to his lips. They nearly closed the restaurant, and when the check came and Davis reached for it and Everett reached faster, Davis said, "But I asked you out." And Everett, with his big green eyes, glanced up as he pulled a credit card from his wallet and said nothing. When Davis started to pull his own credit card from his satchel, Everett, still staring, the movement barely perceptible, shook his head. Davis felt compelled to set the satchel down, and when he did, Everett smiled. Only then did Davis glance at his dessert plate, which still held a few bites of cinnamon apple pie. I don't even like pie, but this is really good. He sliced himself a small bite, speared it with his fork, and ate it. Then he looked at Everett again. You seem like a man of few words. He sliced another bite. Why do you say that? There was something mysterious in Everett's voice. You've been so quiet tonight. The waiter came and silently collected the check and the credit card. All the while, Everett's gaze went uninterrupted. That's more about you than it is about me. Are you saying I talk too much? Davis narrowed his eyes. Everett grinned. No, not at all. When Davis said nothing, Everett continued. I like how much you talk. I like your voice. He tilted his head to the side. So, I listen. But I promise I'm not, he made air quotes, a man of few words. He blinked. I'm just a man. And then, after another few moments of silence, why? What are you thinking about? Davis closed his eyes and bit his lip. I was just... He paused, pensive. I don't think I know what that feels like. What feels like? The waiter returned, handing Everett the receipt and his credit card, smiling at them both, thanking one, then the other. Through all of this, Everett never moved his gaze from Davis. Davis leaned in close as Everett picked up the pen. To be like, I'm just a man. What does that feel like? Everett shrugged and furrowed his brow. He glanced down to sign the check. It doesn't feel like anything, really. It's just... I don't know. It just is. Thank you.